And I hope you are so successful.
I hope I am. can just continue logging in. We don't have anything to vote on right away, so.
Thank you.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. Our first item of business is a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. And I have a volunteer, Cassidy Gatros. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Cassidy. All right, next item of business is to convene a public hearing. This is an action item. Do we need a motion and a second to convene?
Mrs. Pingarelli, I move to convene the public hearing on the budget.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Members, this is a voting item. Please cast your vote.
I'm not logged in yet.
Logged in, okay. Might take a moment.
I think it's time.
While we're waiting, thank you, Mr. Hicks, for coming. Diane, should we do a voice vote?
It's going to be a couple minutes.
Okay. I think Mrs. Doan just needs to complete logging in.
I'm in.
Okay.
All right, I can vote now.
All right, 4-0. Thank you. Mr. Hicks?
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Darwin Stifler, colleagues and community members. Thank you very much for allowing me to present our proposed budget tonight here in the public hearing. As mentioned at the last meeting, there's been absolutely no changes from last meeting where we went in great detail, which has been over a series of time. Mainly the April 27th was our last board meeting when we went in great detail of what are the compensation changes and stuff happening in the 17-18. So this is very redundant, and I apologize for that. But the purpose is now to have a public hearing that allows us to say it once again and allow for any public comment if there is any at that point. So I'm just going to go through it quickly. I'm going to go through just our proposed budget really quickly. I know you've heard it all again, or heard it all. Mention a little bit about, there's also a new line, not a new line item, but a line item you only see once a year that says $500,000 in insurance proceeds. I'll explain that. Then I'll go into the 1.06%, so that is also new this year. That does require a public hearing, so that is part of this public hearing, and then we'll open it up for public comment if that's all right. All right, so the proposed budget. Just as a reminder, we've started this process a long time ago, so it was probably around 9-10 months ago we started this process, working with the board to kind of finalize it. One of the changes is that we have 20 budget team members, and so part of our process is to work through with a budget team that makes a recommendation in conjunction with the superintendent before we present it to the governing board. That 20-team budget team has 9 certified, 6 classified, and 5 administrators, representing the entire district in the process. And one of the bigger things that we made besides expanding it this year was also to include one of those members every month came and made a presentation to the board just to give you a general update where we are and provide an opportunity for the board to make any comment to those board members, or to that budget team members. So we increased the communication and hopefully the transparency in that. So as I already mentioned, at the April 27th board meetings when we talked about really all of our budget increases for compensation and the whole budget plan. So that has a 1.1% increase to all staff. We have the implementation of Prop 206, which is the minimum wage law, which is costing around $800,000. There were some other minor things as well as utilities, with them going up and down with the utility increase, but we're going to do some utility savings. And then part of the April 27th was if there's any legislation passed that is not at that point known, which there was something that was passed, we would follow the intent of that as closely as possible. And so that is the 1.06%. So the 1.06% that is for classroom teachers only was added after the fact, but our budget process allowed, if there's anything beyond, it is to go to salaries for the intent of the legislative process, and so that worked out very well. And so this budget, the 2017-18 adopted budget that you see attached to this, now reflects all of those changes. So as I mentioned, the new legislation requires the board to attest to it, so there is a separate, I'm putting out the roll call vote, and I'll go through some of the other, and I'm going to read a statement on the 1.06%. There also was additional new legislation that created a college credit exam incentive fund and the results-based funding fund. And so those funds are actually in our budget on page 6, but they have no dollar amounts to it. When we revise our budget in December, we will put the funding that's aligned to that, and we'll talk more about that as we know more from the state and get more guidance from either the Auditor General or Arizona Department of Education. We do estimate that our tax rate will be going down. So we're still in the middle of this process, and this is a new process. And so Maricopa County, all the counties are having to align to this new process where they really just set the tax rate and let us know. But we're looking at what is all involved in that. They're working with their attorneys. We've gone through a first preliminary. It was a little off, so we're literally, I talked to him today. He had an error, I had an error, so we're still working on that. It will be going down. As you can see, this is an estimate, so I'm going to say it's still an estimate. It could not go down as much, or it could go down a little bit more, depending on who's right and who's wrong on some of that. So we're working through that with the county. Our weighted student count, which is the primary, and you heard me talk when we talked about selling bonds or our official statement or other things, it is the driver. We get paid based on the number of students and the composition of those students. Weighted student count is when you take a weight and multiply it by the number of actual students here, depending if they get certain services, depending on type of student they are. They're all weighted different, and so our cumulative weight is 47,230. It's a little bit down from the previous year. So that's important to know. Even more important to know is next year is current year funding. So if it goes down in the middle of the year, we will have to make those adjustments. If it goes up, we'll make those adjustments as well. But that's one thing to know. Special ed and ADM are the two biggest decreases. ADM was off by around 30 students. So overall, our total ADM was down around 30 students from that standpoint. As I mentioned, the 212 total M&O, it includes our inflation increase, it includes the 1.06 increase, includes the increase to override, and it does actually have a reduced budget balance carry forward. It was going to go down anyway because last year when we revised, we included Prop 123 that came in at the very end of the year, rolled forward, we paid that out in 16-17, and so almost all of that was paid out, and so that carry forward was going to reduce, and it did, but it is actually even reduced greater than it was 2 years ago, just as an FYI. Formally, our capital outlay, or soft capital, is our district additional assistance, or DAA. That fund is at around $7.2 million. The reduction, so this is important, I do try to highlight any time, as I say capital is one of our biggest issues statewide, let alone just Peoria. We're about 86% of our capital funds are reduced from the state, and that was budget reductions for the Great Recession that was hitting Arizona. So instead of receiving around $17.5 million, we only receive around 2.4, and so a little over $15 million in capital reductions continue from the state. What that means is for the last couple years, we've reduced all schools and departments by 55% of their budget. Those reductions continue. So even though we're passing a budget, everything seems happy. The stress continues at the site level of especially from the capital side of the first year, it's easy to go without capital. The second year, it's a little harder. Now we're going into the third year. Every year that those capital cuts are there, they're either looking at other places to find money, which is either fundraising or going to their community, or they're doing without, or things are breaking. And so we continue to have a capital problem going forward. And our carry forward is $4 million. The classroom site fund, that's a combination of 3 funds. So our base pay, Fund 11, performance pay, Fund 12, and menu items, Fund 13. That's the legal requirement. When the money comes in, we have to split it between those 20, 40, and 40. The amount per pupil increased, so it went from $332 per student, I think it went up $54 to $386 per student. That increase, much like our compensation, so our certified staff that is paid out of our classroom site fund, that also went up. So on average, it was on around a 0.9% of their total compensation went up in total, but that is also reflected in this budget of that increase. 100% of it goes to certified. That was not the case prior to the recession when there was additional funds. Around 75% of the third fund, which is Fund 13, went to compensation, and a quarter of it went to principals for professional development for teachers and their staff. But when the dollar amount went down and they got cut as it came back, we decided not to have that amount for professional development for the principal's discretion, and 100% of it now goes to certified staff. Here are some of the other funds just represented, adjacent ways, and main reason for letting you know this is there is no new levy, so we're not taxing for it. We carry forward a balance of 1.1. We have projects that we're still working on to try to get to engage in, but we have to work through an SFB process. So the new law changed that now any project that's over $50,000 in adjacent ways, we must submit and work through the SFB process. And so we're learning that whole process so we could start working on those. Indirect costs is when we have all these grants spread out, we take a little bit off the top to cover certain functions that happen at the central office that we don't code directly to a grant, and so this allows us to indirectly code those expenses to it, and that's around 1.2 million. Structural Improvement Fund is often called the gaming money. That is split 50-50. Half of it goes to teacher compensation, the other half goes to instructional improvement type funds or type activities. School Plant Fund is our cell tower. Or did I get that wrong? I got that wrong. It's our rental? Cell assets, and sorry. So like when we've done our online auctions and stuff like that that have been very successful, money comes in. Federal and state grants up a little bit, $18 million. We do really copy that from at the end of the year what it is this year. As those grants get approved at the ADE level, at the Arizona Department of Education level, we will then start revising. So you'll see a December revision of federal and state grants being adjusted, but we really take last year's amount and plug it right in for our proposed and adopted, just to be clear. And so that is that. If it's all right, if I just jump right on to, just really quickly, a statement also in when the budget is adopted, there's a request just for clarification in case the board asks questions. It asks for approval of up to $500,000 in insurance proceeds, and that's just a requirement in 151103 that requires the governing board to approve any of those expenses. We ask the board up front when we're adopting a board to approve up to that. I will tell you, I think last year when I looked in 16-17, we spent $500. So it's really just a general, please approve this budget with this authority to do this. If we have anything, it just allows us to speed up the process that we don't have to stop and wait if we're going to repair or replace something using insurance proceeds and wait for us to come to the board for approval. We get the pre-approval up front. So I'll be honest, by no means do I think we're going to spend $500,000. It's historically what we've used, so we'll continue to use that. If there's something big, we'll let you know as we're going, but this allows us the approval process to move forward without waiting for your approval at that time. Hopefully that's acceptable to the board. And then the third, if it's all right, we do have a public hearing. This public hearing is not just for the budget as a requirement, it's also a requirement for the 1.06%. And so attached to that agenda item, not the public hearing, I do have a implementation, a memo, and if you allow me, I'm just going to read it just so that everybody can hear it. In accordance with the guidance from the Office of the Arizona Auditor General, Peoria Unified is implementing the 1.06 teacher salary increase for the 2017-18 school year. The district will implement a supplemental pay in December of 2017 for distribution to all eligible teachers. Eligibility is determined by teaching status during the 16-17 school year in Arizona. Teachers cannot be contracted employee in either 2016 or 2017, or 2016-17, or in 2017-18, nor can they be a substitute in either of those years. The increase of 1.06% is calculating using all funds paid to teachers coded to the function code 1000, which is instruction. All teachers must be employed before November 1st, 2017 to be eligible for this. This definition is not the same as certified staff that is identified in the classroom site fund. For the adopted budget, Peoria has 1,982 teachers in the 16-17 school year that meet this criteria, which will generate $973,000 before benefit costs. That equates to $491 per teacher on average. Only the Arizona State Retirement System and the FICA benefit costs are covered by this budget allotment. The total will be revised by November 1st, 2017. A public hearing to present this allocation plan will be at the District Administration Center in the Governing Boardroom tonight at 6 o'clock. So this was the statement. I just wanted to read it just to be clear. I do appreciate we have a teacher that was here. We emailed this out to all teachers so that they are notified of the intent in the plan for allow them. We had one teacher in this room who has handled dozens and dozens of those calls, so I appreciate her ability to communicate with me to clarify. And probably the most clarification is needed around the statement of the contracted teachers, because teachers believe they have a contract. I'm a contracted teacher. That's really the third party. So as school districts across Arizona either use ESI or SMART schools to allow an ability for a teacher to retire a little bit but still continue their services and their expertise, those teachers are not eligible whatsoever. So if we have somebody that's not an employee and they're contracted through a third party, they are not eligible whatsoever. And so that has probably been the bulk of the communications and questions and clarification. And then the second is that there has been some teachers either email me directly or Ms. Trinaberg about that this definition is different than classroom site funds. So just to be clear, this was not a decision by the Peoria School District. We're following all compliance, but this is only for classroom teachers. So if they're not instructing in front of students, they will not be receiving this money. And so they would be receiving the classroom site fund because it's certified staff, and so they could be doing related services and providing services to student, but they were not providing instruction to a class or to the student. Therefore, they are not eligible. And that will be difficult. So you have counselors, you have speech language pathologists, and those type that are providing services, but it's not instructional. So just to be clear, because we're having a lot, and we've had some people upset and want to know who to talk to that they're not part of this group. It is a definition that is set by the legislature when they pass this. It's appreciative that they passed this. It's appreciative that there's additional money going to teachers, but it does come with lots of strings and lots of confusion. And so that last statement was an editorial comment, just to be clear. So I just wanted to be clear to do that. We did send the email out. There is some confusion if that was required, where the Auditor General did not require a specific email. But a lot of the districts, the way they're reading legislation, thought that we did. And just to be safe, I said I'm going to send the email out. I apologize for causing the lots of phone calls that have been received by others. But I thought I'd rather go over compliant than under compliant in essence, because this 1.06% is specifically required to be audit tested. So our auditors are going to have to modify their auditing procedures, and they will have to audit test this payment and this amount to our teachers to make sure that the right dollars amount and the right people are getting this. This is also not just 1 year, it is 2 years. So next year we'll go from 1.06% to 2.12%, so it doubles next year. And we'll go through the same process again next year. So I just wanted to make that extra statement on 106. It is a public hearing, not just for our budget, but also if any comments on the 1.06. So if it's okay, I'll stand for any questions from the board, and if there's any after that, then we'll make it available if any community members would like to speak.
Okay. Mrs. Connect, would you like to start us off?
I have no questions, thank you.
Mrs. Sejar Martinez?
No questions, just thank you. We've all been a part of this process and asked questions, so I appreciate all your efforts.
All right, Mrs. Doan?
Nothing, thank you.
And you did a great job. I have no questions either. So this is an action item, so I would need a motion in a second. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that would be. I'm rushing it through. So, is there any public comment at this time? Which would kind of take away from a public hearing. Thank you. I stand corrected. Okay. seeing that nobody wants to speak up, then I guess then it's an action item, so I would need a motion and a second.
Actually, Mrs. Pingerelli, I move to adjourn the public hearing.
That would be great. Thank you.
I'll second that.
Getting off to a good start tonight. All right.
Did.
So,
Mrs. Doan seconded.
Is somebody going to second to close? Oh, you did? Okay,
yeah,
good.
Mrs.
good,
Down
good.
did. So we do need a vote on this. Thank you. All right, passes 4-1, and I just wanted to say I failed to mention at the beginning that Mr. Sandoval will not be joining us tonight, so I guess he is on the road. So, all right, next agenda item is staff recognitions, and Mrs. Aries has none tonight. Dr. Stifler?
Mrs. Pingerelli, members of the governing board, I have two quick ones tonight. It's exciting. It's always, let me start again. Paige Harris from Sunrise Mountain High School received an honorary ESPY award, and ABC 15 aired her special recognition during their 6 p.m. news segment last night. To include some background information, the ESPY Awards are put on by ESPN to celebrate the biggest names in sports for their various talents and achievements. Paige has autism and epilepsy and participates in basketball, swimming, track and field, flag football, bocce ball, volleyball, and unified sports. Paige's bio was submitted by Special Olympics of Arizona. So it was actually first submitted to the AIA, then that made it to Special Olympics, which made it to ESPN, and 24 students across the country were so honored, and Paige it was a great event. I got to be there as well. Not at the ESPN, but when she received the award here. Also, according to Box Clever Education, Peoria Unified is one of the top 10 school districts on social media in the United States. As you know, Peoria Unified School District is active on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Pinterest, and we use social media as a way to share news about events and community information, all while using high-quality images with school district branding. We are also the only district in the state of Arizona that made the list. Here endeth my report.
All right, thank you very much. Does any board member have any other input?
No, Mrs. Pingerelli, but I think we need to congratulate Mrs. Airy and her team for that award. Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations. All right, board recognitions, item number 7. I'll start with Mrs. Doan.
I don't have anything tonight.
Mrs. Sejar Martinez.
I do not have anything tonight.
Mrs. Connect.
No, thank you.
Okay, I have none either. This could be a shorter meeting. All right, item number 8, request to address the governing board regarding matters not included on the agenda. I don't have anything.
You do have one.
Do that now?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know if you wanted it during, okay, never mind. Then we have one, Daniel Christian.
Good evening.
Hello.
I'm Daniel Christian, and I'm representing Megan Miller. Fortunately, she is not able to attend tonight, and we're asking for the formal hearing that she had previously signed up for. She attended last month, but the board wasn't able to rule on her request to have the liquidated damages waived and reimbursed. So that's why I'm speaking on her behalf to just follow up and continue the request. She taught at Peoria School District for 7 years and into the classroom, and then her 8th year she moved into a reading specialist position in the same school down the hall. In her 9th year, she ended up getting a position unexpectedly in education, but with a private company, and let the board know that she'd be leaving. And in that, there was a penalty based on the liquidated damages clause in her employment agreement. With the liquidated damages are normally held unenforceable. So under contract law, under Arizona, they're unenforceable unless 2 things are met, and those are the amount that was put in the contract are reasonable, or a reasonable forecast of the just compensation of those damages, as well as it was incapable or very difficult to estimate what those damages would be when the contract was made. In this particular position, again, she's a Title I specialist. It was federal funds coming in. She was in a position that did not need to be replaced. In fact, the school did not post or look for another person to fill that position. It's not a position that a sub is needed, so there wasn't any time spent in looking for another person. There wasn't any money that, as additional cost. Instead, the school got to keep the money and used it to help the students, and they used it for an educational program. So in this particular case, it would be something that the school district would be getting an economic windfall of the $2,500 by trying to enforce this particular clause, as well as it would be unjust on Ms. Miller as well. This was a significant part of the amount that she ended up earning that year, as well as consistent with law. It's something not consistent with what the school was going for, as well as the law. Furthermore, it was something that could be estimated at the time of the contract, which would have been nominal. So both of these things were not met to make this an enforceable contract. So I'm just asking, again, very briefly, that the board rule and waive that penalty, as well as reimburse her based on the law of the state and the policy of the school district. Thank you.
Thank you.
Much. All right. Next item. Item number 9, consideration of the Maintenance and Operations and District Additional Assistance Fund budgets for 2017-2018 fiscal year and authorization to spend up to $500,000 of insurance proceeds. And do we need Mr. Hicks back again? No?
He already read that.
Okay,
Told us about it, so.
we're good.
So, yes, ma'am. So, Ms. Pingarelli, the administrative recommendation is that the governing board approve the expenditure budget, including the Maintenance and Operations and District Additional Assistance Fund for 2017-18, and authorize the expenditure of up to $500,000 of insurance proceeds.
Okay, to move it forward, I just need a motion and a second.
Mrs. Pingarelli,
Yes.
I move to accept the recommendation as written.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All right. This is an action. Do we
It will
want to
serve
just?
as a roll call because your names are
Right.
right there.
Right.
You won't be able to hide.
Okay, no, we don't.
Not that you ever would.
Then members, please vote. All right, passes 4-0. Next agenda item. Agenda item number 10, address agenda and consider adoption or recommended changes. Does any member need to change any item? Nope.
No.
Okay, let's move on. Agenda item number 11. Do we need to formally?
Unless it's adjusted, we'll just let that go.
It's kind of what we've done in the past. All right, agenda number 11, consideration of approval of the allocation plan for the 1.06% additional teacher salary increase for eligible teachers. Again, this was already,
Mrs. Pingarelli, members of the board, the administration recommends that the governing board approve the allocation plan of the additional 1.06% increase for all eligible teachers. And again, our method of voting will qualify as a roll call vote.
and I would need a motion and a second.
I'll move that we go ahead and approve the allocation plan as presented.
I'll go ahead and second that one. All right, this is an action item. Please cast your vote. Okay, passes 4-0. Next agenda item number 12, discussion regarding board committee selection. This is one thing that was, I think, brought up by Mrs. Ceja Martinez. So I don't know if you want to start out the discussion on this.
Sure, thank you for that, Mrs. Pingerelli. Governing board members and administration, I appreciate the opportunity to discuss this with you. As this next coming year, we'll have an opportunity to discuss the vision of our community and definitely want to have community say in that. Kathy, I could not agree with you more when you say we are representatives of community schools. So it's so important that we highlight that conversation. Specifically, I only want to discuss what the governing board has and control over in regards to what we get advice on, which is policy BDF, advisory committees. At this time, there is language in the third paragraph, or in the second paragraph, one that highlights members should be broadly representative of the community. I definitely agree with that. But the third paragraph is what I'm looking at and want to hone in our attention and discuss modifying that to meet our current needs, especially after going the beginning of the year, our policy for choosing the boundary and the bond committee, having true representation of our district. Right now, it states that the governing board president, in conjunction with the superintendent, shall develop guidelines for each committee. I would like to discuss with the governing board and get your feedback to make an amendment that the governing board shall make the guidelines to develop each committee. My interest is based on verbatims I've received across the 42 schools I've visited before and after school, and have talked to an array of parents and teachers that state we never know that there's a committee or where's the opportunity to participate in a committee. So to help further that process, we definitely have strengths of advertising, but to further that process, to get more involvement, is to make it available to everybody on an ongoing process. I would like to see the governing board shall choose at least 2 members each in the selection process and have at least 1 administrator, 1 certified, and 1 classified staff represented on our committees going forward, so that when we get an advisory committee, we're getting a full scope of employees of the district as well as community members across the district. I have looked at our past practices. The Community Legislative Network application, I believe, is exactly what I was looking for, and I would like to present this to the governing board. And the only thing I would like to add, which is already drafted by the Peoria Unified School District, is add a list of committees that we may potentially have. Currently, it reads your general information, check what applies, like your PUSD employee, certified classified, parent, elementary, school, or if you're a resident of the district with no child enrolled. But the idea is we keep an application on file at any time. So anytime the governing board needs to pull and make a committee, we have a long-standing list of applicants to show their interest that we pull from. And then the governing board gets together, chooses each what we want to represent in this committee, so that when we get advice from this committee, it's true representation of community schools. So that's where I stand.
Mrs. Connect, do you have input on that?
No, I don't. Perhaps this can be included in our next report so we can review it, maybe even with Mrs. Martinez's suggestions in there, so we have an opportunity to review them before we make any decisions. I mean, I don't have any problem with, greater outreach from our community.
Mrs. Doan?
Well, I'd have to say, I'm very interested in this, and I'd like to see, especially, opportunity to get new faces that are not aware or maybe a little shy, but can be encouraged to include their efforts, and a way to include people that have not heretofore been included. I think maybe we could work that in with this. I'm interested in this, yes. I'd like to continue forward with this.
I would think that if this is an application that's going out broadly, that should be distributed through our parent council, through our PTAs, and perhaps even when we onboard volunteers at each of the school sites and have them fill out their applications to be volunteers on our campuses, that could be included in that packet, and then they could be part of the database of potential volunteers on committees.
Excellent. I like that idea. I was also even thinking, even had available online, so anybody at any point within the boundaries can submit it and it'll go in electronically, have it at our city councils, so if anybody on those commissions could volunteer based on the reflection of our last bond committee and the representation of our student population, it'd be nice to support our vision that we represent our community as well as our students that mirror each other.
So if we're going to have more papers to look at, more suggestions to think about before we put this to a vote, certainly I think Mrs. Airy could give us some thoughts about logistics and feasibility, and what would be an effective and efficient way to accomplish Mrs. Martinez's goals.
My only concern is time frame. I would like to see this go out as soon as possible. School year is going to start in about 4 weeks, and a lot of papers go out to all the community members and parents, teachers, and I would like to execute this as fast as possible because we do need to create, the governing board asked for a bond committee to reconvene. And if we had a broad range of participants from the community, members that we've never had before, it would be a great opportunity to get them involved. So my only concern is time frame and why I'm wanting to push the sooner the better.
Did the board ask for a bond committee to reconvene?
Mhm. Yes, we did.
Did we?
For 17-18.
I think you did.
Yep, you did, and we seconded.
The, Mrs. Pingarelli, members of the board, policy allows for superintendent to create regulation to support board policy. An efficient way to accomplish this would be to review this form, change it a little bit, suggest possible committees. I would recommend that it not be locked into the same formation for everything. The board certainly, to call for a committee, can give certain direction for a certain committee. There may be times, for instance, when you want an outside expert from without our community to be on the committee. There may be times when you only want parents with young children, and there could be many different reasons. So it should be as flexible as possible, but it is possible to do in a relatively short turnaround for the administrative staff to create a pool or to seek a pool of people who would be interested, who may be interested in working on various district committees. And then as the board calls a committee, or when a board calls a committee, the board can be very specific in what they'd like to see in that committee.
I appreciate you, Mrs. Pingarelli. I appreciate you acknowledging that the administration, I believe that's current practice, that they currently seek parents who want to participate. I know we have site councils across the district, and I'm interested in seeing if they would be part of some of these discussions since they already actively work at the school sites, but take it beyond that where it's not just administration giving or seeking, it's just available to everybody at any point they could submit.
I agree with you. What I meant to say is, by administration, my staff and I can execute that vision to generate the list.
I apologize for my confusion. That's basically it. Where I was headed is so that we have full community involvement if we represent the community.
Looks good.
Well, I think as we go forward on a new bond committee, that the more participation that we have, more people to choose from would be better. Last one, we had 5 people just from the north. So I think if we have a good representation, I think the community would feel more comfortable with that. Thank you very much, Dr. Stifler, for.
Work with staff, and as quickly as possible,
Okay.
I will bring in the form of, in policy parlance, an exhibit forward.
Okay.
And that exhibit, we will explore ways to share it as widely as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that was a good discussion. Then let's move on to item number 13.
Me.
Report and discussion on local, state, and federal legislative issues and activities. Dr. Stifler.
Mrs. Pingarelli, members of the board, my report is, I think, pretty short tonight. I would lift up for you 2 things, and they sound the same, but they're very different: ESA and ESSA. So in the realm of ESA, a discussion that's happening around the state is that there is a citizens group which is collecting signatures to an initiative process to put the concept of the law that was just passed by the legislature to the vote of the people. It's been reported, it hasn't been validated, but it's been reported that they believe that they have got enough signatures to do that. Well, there's a process that comes after that, but so what could impact us? That could impact us. That's out there. So that will continue to either march forward or it won't over the next month. Regarding ESSA, with a new administration in Washington, D.C., how to administer the regulations, how to apply the law, there's some changes happening. And also, it's important to know that the federal fiscal year runs different than our fiscal year. Our fiscal year, as you're adopting a budget tonight, runs July 1 to June 30th. The federal year begins on October 1st. They do not feel bound by the limitations of our fiscal year. Why would I bring this up? We have been, it has been indicated that there are that there may be significant changes in how ESSA funds are distributed amongst the states and districts, including to us. And that it would not be unreasonable for us to expect at least a 10% cut. Perhaps greater than that. So that's happened before, but what's happening here is those discussions are across more grant programs than in the past. Okay? Will 21st Century program look the same as it has looked in the past? Will Title II look the same as it has in the past? And even will some of the CTE funding look the same as it has in the past? All right? So, as a prudent administration, cannot allocate funds to sites right now that we may not have and spend them. Every school, every principal, every teacher, every program would like us to be able to say, here's all of your funding for the entire year right now. We know what it is. Please go forward and do the right thing. We are going to have to hold back a certain amount until we have confidence from the Arizona Department of Education that it is safe to allocate that so that we don't overexpend. This causes difficulties within our district and other school districts as well. And I would tell you, and I'm not saying that it's inappropriate for Congress or the Department of Education to discuss these. I'm saying it is difficult that the fiscal years don't line up with one another. But that's not a new problem. So here endeth my report.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any comment, questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much.
Let me go further. Regarding people, we're okay. Okay, so we're not going to cut somebody. But for some of the programs, for some of the supplies that schools hope to buy, they're not going to be able to buy them before school starts. That's difficult. That's what that means in the end.
And if the cuts are made, then that would be a permanent cut.
that would be a permanent, at least for this year. Those decisions are made on an annual basis. But it means that we won't have overexpended those budgets.
So it could be a wait, and it could be a no.
It could be a wait and it could be a no. And I'm hopeful that it's a wait rather than a no, or not as bad a no as we fear it might be.
And I'm kind of moving on, but we're in the federal realm here. Are we monitoring what may or may not happen with changes in federal health care?
We are, to a degree. It's a very complicated thing as we look and we watch through that, but we are watching all of those things. Similarly, we are looking at also what's happening, I guess to be more complete. There are discussions in the previous administration, some rules about overtime, some rules about exempt employees were put in place, and there is talk of rolling those things back. Those have implications on budgets and on employees as well.
Well, I think in terms of the public watching what's happening with the federal government on changes that may or may not happen to healthcare, we tend to think of that in terms of how is that going to affect me as an individual or my family on healthcare, but it does have impact on what happens in schools in terms of Medicare funding, or is it Medicaid funding?
Medicaid funding?
Medicaid funding that the schools get for students in need.
It possibly could, and how the state meets that need as well. There are students who are eligible for services now that may not be eligible for services in the future.
And if the state loses federal funding for health care, those costs will have to be covered by the state in some cases, and that would affect the education budget also.
Likely so.
Likely so. Okay. So we should be paying attention.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, next agenda item, number 14, request for agenda items for future governing board meetings. Mrs. Doan, do you have any?
Oh, I think we're pretty full up.
Hopefully, we'll get through most of them on the 28th then. Mrs. Connect, do you have any?
Yes, heavy on my mind lately. I have just returned from a Spanish immersion program where I'm trying to reestablish my skills from when I was a bilingual teacher in 1989. Anyway, it's been a while since this board, certainly this iteration of the board, has not talked about 3 things that I'm interested in. I'd like to review our second language instruction for our English-speaking students that are learning a second language. I would like to review our dual language programs that currently exist. I know we just got, one of our school that has that program just got an A+ award. So talk about that and how that may be duplicated or expanded. And then an ESL update, including student data and an overview of that program and how it's implemented in and across our schools. I have had this discussion previously, but since our newest board members have joined the team and our new superintendent, we have not. And I think there's some good conversation to be had.
Mrs. Connect had asked if we could prepare a report, have a bit of time to prepare a report, then that I would present to all governing board members, then to perhaps after that craft the agenda item. Would that be acceptable?
If one of my board members is interested in the same topic,
I second that.
that'll be fine, sir.
It will take a little while to do,
Sure.
but we'll be able to. We're going to get school open first, and then we'll work on
Yes,
that.
it is not an emergency.
Mrs. Harman-Tunis?
Not at this time, thank you.
I have none either. Be happy to get through most of them on the 28th and get caught up. All right, next item is item number 15, consideration of approval of the consent agenda. Does any member need any item pulled from the consent agenda?
Mrs. Pangarelli, I only want to pull one, which is the board minutes from last June 22nd.
Okay. Any other items? We'll just need to wait a minute till Diane adjusts things. It's pulled, okay. All right, so let's, I would need a motion and a second then to move the consent agenda minus item number 16.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I second that.
All right, this is a voting item. Members, please cast your vote. All right, passes 4-0. Mrs. Sehar Martinez, you need to discuss item number 16.
Thank you, Mrs. Pangarelli. And I'm getting comfortable with reviewing the minutes and rewatching the whole governing board meeting, all the governing board meetings. And I just want to highlight two things I want clarified. First, in the statement where I identified developer assistance agreement, how I pulled that, I want to clearly state my discontent and have it recorded in our minutes with the current developer assistance agreement, and highlight to David's point, and I'm quoting, confident in the value we add to Peoria, that it's identified of my discontent. The other piece of information is make a correction on the request on accreditation report be presented by Dr. Stifler. I want to just clarify a report on, I requested two things: expand leadership opportunities for stakeholders and expand relationships with community groups. And so I can copy, paste, and send that over, so that way there's no extra work, but it's pretty straightforward.
Actually, it would take a recommendation, recommendation from you and approval by your board mates to amend the minutes to carry that forward.
Thank you.
All right, I will move that Mrs. Sehar Martinez's comments be added to the minutes. That's
I second that.
right.
And that's a voting item.
Then I would need a motion and a second.
We just had the motion and the
That's true,
second.
I got it. Okay, well, then we need to vote.
Question,
Yes.
I wasn't here. Should I abstain from that?
I do not believe that you are legally bound to do so. So
Okay,
I don't think you need to.
okay.
Three. We'd have enough.
To vote on it.
Okay.
It is an action item, so it's not
No.
loaded in such a way as to do that. We are changing our software here.
Okay.
Take a vote, and I'll catch up on the software afterwards
Okay, then all in favor
of amending the minutes.
of amending the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Then we'll catch up on how to figure that out in the software, but we will amend the minutes and bring them back to you for approval as amended on the August 10th meeting,
Okay,
if I got that date right.
sounds good. All right. Next agenda item then. Are we down to 28?
We're on 17.
Yes, ma'am, I believe so.
Okay. All right, number 28, Budget, Facilities, Planning, and Construction Report. All of these reports can be viewed online for all that are interested. Thank you. Item number 29, District Budget Report for the month of May 2017. And again, that is online. Thank you. Agenda item number 30, District Enrollment Report, May 2017. Again, that is online. And item number 31, Report on Upcoming Meetings and Events. And on this one, we have, Just trying to pull out a couple of things. We have the all-day retreat, special board meeting on July 28th at 8 o'clock. Teachers are back and returning back on August 7th. And on August 9th is the first day of school. And Dr. Stifler gives that a thumbs up.
Super exciting. That's what it's all about.
Thank you. All right. Next item is 32, draft agenda of the August 10th meeting. So all that can come or view it online, you're welcome. We'll be here at 6 p.m. Thank you very much. Next item, item 33, board member opportunity to readdress agenda items. Does any member need to readdress any items tonight?
No.
All right. Then last item is adjournment. Consideration of adjournment. I would need a motion and a second.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
That was very fast. Okay, it's an action item. Please cast your vote. I think this is the shortest meeting on record, maybe?
Want to say that out loud, but yes.
No,
ma'am.
Passes 4-0. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming tonight.